Chapter 1: Collapse. The conference room was packed, the fluorescent lights buzzing softly overhead. I stood at the front, my laptop balanced precariously on the podium, PowerPoint slides flicking by one by one. My voice trembled, betraying a fatigue I could no longer hide. Hours of back-to-back meetings, endless deadlines, and skipped meals had caught up to me. My chest felt tight, but I forced another smile at the clients sitting across the table, nodding along politely as if I weren't teetering on the edge of something catastrophic. And that's why integrating the new analytics system will streamline operations by at least 30% over the next quarter. I finished, my words cracking slightly. A polite round of applause followed, though it sounded muffled to me, almost distant. My vision blurred at the edges, and a faint ringing filled my ears. I shifted my weight from one foot to the other, hoping it would pass, but the pressure in my chest intensified, pressing down like a vice. "Are you okay?" someone asked. It was Jenna from accounting, her brow furrowed with genuine concern. I opened my mouth to respond, but the words lodged somewhere in my throat. A cold sweat trickled down my temple. Just a second," I muttered, gripping the podium tighter. My fingers trembled, and the taste of iron coated my tongue. Then, without warning, the room tilted, a spinning carousel of faces and fluorescent light. I stumbled, catching myself on the edge of the table. And then the world went black. I woke up to a harsh, mechanical beep and the smell of antiseptic. My chest was heavy, each breath a laborious effort, as if I were breathing through a straw. A white ceiling hovered above me, dotted with the faint glow of fluorescent lights, and monitors around my bed painted my vital signs in urgent, rhythmic lines. A nurse rushed in, clipboard in hand. "Mr. Daniels? Can you hear me?" I tried to speak, but only a croak emerged. My throat felt dry, my body alien to me. Panic surged as I realized I didn't fully understand what had happened. "You had a heart attack," she said gently, noting my blank stare. "At 34, which is unusual. The doctor will be here shortly." I blinked, tried to process the words. Heart attack? Me? At 34? The numbers made no sense in my mind, though the ache in my chest told a grimly clear story. A man in scrubs entered, brisk and professional. He introduced himself as Dr. Halpern, the cardiologist on call. "You're lucky you weren't alone when this happened," he said, checking the monitors. "If you'd waited even an hour longer, the outcome could have been very different." I collapsed at work. I managed to whisper. My voice cracked. "I was just presenting." He nodded, his expression sympathetic but clinical. "Stress, long hours, and maybe underlying conditions. You're going to need rest, medication, and a thorough evaluation. Your heart, well, it's resilient, but it's given you a very clear warning." I wanted to say more, to explain how I'd been juggling everything. The late nights, the endless emails, the pressure from management, but my words tangled in exhaustion and fear. Instead, I just closed my eyes, letting the reality wash over me. "Has your wife been notified?" Dr. Halpern asked the nurse. A pause. "Yes, she's been called." "Call," I croaked, each word a monumental effort. "Did she come?" The nurse's eyes flickered slightly. "No, not yet." Something inside me twisted. Not yet. That phrase felt like a dagger, sharper than any pain in my chest. My mind raced through the possibilities, all of them terrible. Traffic? She must be stuck somewhere. But hours passed, or was it minutes? And still, Clara didn't arrive. My body was weak, but my thoughts became sharper, colder, the sting of abandonment setting in before I had even fully recovered. The hospital room was a strange liminal space, suspended between life and fragility. The walls were pale, almost sterile, and the hum of medical machinery was a constant reminder of my body's betrayal. A small window let in the afternoon sun, but it did little to warm the dread curling in my stomach. The nurse adjusted my foredrip, her movements precise and calm. "You need fluids and medications. We're going to stabilize you first," she said. Her voice was a lifeline, steady in contrast to the storm of confusion inside me. I tried to sit up, but found my muscles refuse cooperation. The room tilted again. Don't push yourself, she cautioned. You need rest. You're fragile right now. I nodded weakly, trying to summon some semblance of composure. The irony wasn't lost on me. I had spent decades preparing for every eventuality in my career, yet here I was undone by my own body. The walls of control I'd built around my life were crumbling, and the one person I had expected to be by my side, Clara, was absent. Nurses came and went, checking vitals, adjusting monitors, and whispering updates about my condition to each other. Dr. Halpern returned briefly, examining the test results. Your heart responded well to initial treatment, he said, but we need to monitor you for complications. Any exertion, even minor stress, could trigger another episode. I swallowed hard, the enormity of dependence pressing down on me. Every day before this, I had been the problem solver, the one others relied on. Now I was fragile, tethered to machines, at the mercy of strangers and scrubs. I tried to call Clara again from the bedside phone, my fingers trembling as I dialed. The line rang once, twice, thrice, straight to voicemail. My chest tightened further, not from heart pain this time, but from something far more bitter. The sting of betrayal, the hollow absence of care. I sat back against the pillows, drained, my heart still thudding in uneven beats. Around me, the hospital moved in mechanical efficiency, nurses attending to patients, monitors beeping, doctors consulting quietly. I was just another patient in a sea of fragility, yet the sense of personal abandonment made every beep sharper, every shadow longer. I closed my eyes, letting the tension seep from my shoulders. The realization settled in slowly, like an unwelcome guest that refuses to leave. I was alone here. Clara had been notified. Clara had been called. And yet, she had chosen not to come. For the first time in years, I felt the raw weight of isolation, an emotional void that no doctor, no medicine could fill. The sterile room, the faint scent of antiseptic, the soft hum of machines, all of it became a backdrop for the deepest shock of my life. That the person I thought I could count on had abandoned me when I was most vulnerable. And there I lay, weak, tethered to monitors and IVs, staring at the ceiling as the reality settled like ice in my chest. Chapter 2, Waiting in Silence. The days in the hospital blurred into each other, a monotonous rhythm of beeping monitors, routine checks, and the sterile scent of antiseptic that clung to everything. I floated in a haze, my body weak and unfamiliar, tethered to machines that measured my every heartbeat, every drop of oxygen, every tremor of my pulse. The nurses moved around me like ghosts, efficient and distant, yet each touch of their hands reminded me I was alive. That was something, at least. I tried to read, but the pages swam before my eyes, words dissolving into indecipherable patterns. The TV murmured in the background, an indistinct hum of news and daytime talk shows. I hadn't seen the sun properly in days, except for the brief strip of light that slanted through the window each morning. Even that felt foreign, a reminder that the world outside continued while I lay trapped in this quiet, sterile purgatory. Each time the door opened, my heart leapt. Perhaps it would be her this time, Clara, finally arriving with worried eyes, a soft word, a hand pressed to mine. But every time it was someone else. A nurse, a doctor, a technician. They smiled politely, checked my vitals, adjusted my and left. No Clara, no familiar warmth. Just the clinical hum of life-saving machinery. The first morning I realized she hadn't come, I whispered her name from the bed, my voice barely audible. Clara. My throat was raw, dry from the hospital air, and my body shook with a mixture of weakness and rising panic. The nurse, Sarah, glanced at me over her clipboard. She hasn't visited, she said softly, with a hint of apology in her eyes. She hasn't. My chest tightened, not from pain, but from a profound, dizzying disappointment. My heart wasn't just healing from the attack. It was shattering in this slow, insidious way that left me hollow. I'm afraid not, she replied. She's been called, though. The staff notified her. I let out a shaky breath. one hand clutching the thin hospital sheet like it could anchor me. Called. She was called. And she hasn't come. The words tasted bitter. Sarah didn't answer. She simply checked my monitors again and left the room, leaving me staring at the ceiling, my mind spinning. As the hours dragged into another day, I became acutely aware of the emptiness around me. I listened to the faint conversations in the hallway. Doctors consulting, families speaking quietly, phones ringing in distant rooms. Each sound was a reminder that life outside my room continued, moving, breathing, laughing without me. I tried to reach out in other ways. My phone sat on the small table beside the bed. My trembling fingers typed her name countless times, composing messages that always ended unsent. I wanted to say, "I'm scared. Please come." But the weight in my chest and the weariness in my limbs made it impossible to press send. Then, on the third day, or was it the fourth, I noticed the phone buzzing with a notification from a social media app. Weakly, I propped myself up on pillows and squinted at the screen. It was Felicity. A photograph had been posted. A bright, cheerful image of a lakeside picnic. Clara, Felicity, Robert, and several extended family members were in the frame, smiling for the camera, their arms around one another. The sunlight danced on the water behind them, the green of the trees vibrant, almost mocking in its vitality. The caption glared at me, almost personally. Family day without the drama. My stomach dropped. I stared at it, unable to move, unable to blink away the disbelief. The world tilted again, not physically, but emotionally. I had been lying here fighting for life, tethered to machines, barely able to lift my head. And while I hovered between vulnerability and exhaustion, they had decided to celebrate, to enjoy themselves, without even thinking of me. I couldn't speak. My throat tightened, and a wave of nausea rolled through me. The machines beeped steadily, their rhythm now mocking a mechanical pulse in contrast to the emotional chaos inside me. My mind ran through the scene. Them laughing, toasting with soft drinks, taking photos, posting online, all deliberate, all excluding me. The betrayal was suffocating. It wasn't just that they hadn't come. It was the conscious, active choice to leave me out, to ignore my suffering while they went about their lives. Each smile in that photograph was a dagger. Each laugh in the comments a cruel echo. My chest hurt again, this time not from the heart attack, but from the sheer weight of being abandoned by the people I had trusted most. I try to remember the last time I had felt genuinely included, genuinely cared for by them. But the memories felt distant, like they belonged to someone else, someone naive who had believed in family in the way I once did. Felicity's post was more than just a social media update. It was a declaration, a statement that my life, my suffering, my very existence during those hours had been irrelevant to them. Anger bubbled beneath the surface, but was a weak, exhausted anger, simmering alongside sadness and disbelief. I wanted to scream, to throw the phone across the room, to demand that the world acknowledge the injustice of it. But I had no strength to do anything except stare, my hand trembling as it hovered over the device. A nurse entered mid-afternoon, checking my vitals again. "How are you feeling?" she asked, her voice gentle. "Alone," I whispered, almost without thinking. "Completely alone." She paused, perhaps unsure how to respond. "You're not alone, Mr. Daniels," she said softly. "We're here. The staff, we're here." I nodded weakly, but the words didn't reach the part of me that ached. Presence wasn't just physical. Presence was someone who mattered, someone I had trusted, someone whose absence carved a hollow pit in my chest. Later, I lay back, staring at the ceiling, replaying the image of that picnic in my mind. The colors were almost too vivid, the smiles too perfect. My fingers brushed the phone instinctively, scrolling through the comments, reading the laughter and mockery that surrounded that bright, sunlit day. Felicity had written something else beneath it, something lighthearted and condescending. "Taking time to work on himself. Guess we're on our own adventure today." The words hit harder than any physical blow. They had mocked me while I was fighting for my life. They had celebrated my absence. The contrast between my weakness, my tethered, fragile state, and their carefree laughter was impossible to ignore. The flood of emotions hit me at once. Shock, disbelief, anger, and a deep, raw sadness. It was not just abandonment. It was betrayal, deliberate and cruel. My heart, already weakened, already trembling, ached anew for a reason far beyond the physical. I had been left to fight alone, and they had chosen to ignore it, to mock it, to erase it from their lives. And that realization settled in, cold and unyielding. My family had deliberately excluded me while I was fighting for life. Chapter 3: Hidden Mockery. The hospital room had become a place of quiet dread, a cage of soft beeps and antiseptic smells. I lay propped up against the pillows, my body still frail, every movement an effort. My phone rested on the small table beside me, vibrating occasionally with notifications I was too weak to check, or perhaps too afraid to confront. Hours of silence had passed since I first saw Felicity's lakeside post. My mind refused to rest, replaying the image over and over. And yet, out of some compulsion I couldn't resist, I picked up the phone again. I scrolled through her profile, each swipe a deliberate step closer to pain, and there it was. The comments section under that cheerful, sunlit photo. "Hope he's taking time to work on himself," one comment read, followed by a string of laughing emojis. My stomach knotted. The words were sharp, a jagged reminder of my vulnerability. Felicity herself had added a little quip beneath it. "Drama-free family day, and he's probably sleeping in a hospital bed somewhere. LOL. Poor guy." I couldn't breathe for a moment. My fingers trembled as I held the phone, my knuckles white. The room felt suddenly smaller, the ceiling lower, the walls pressing in as if to echo the humiliation I felt coursing through my chest. I was weak, yes, but never had I felt so powerless. To be mocked while tethered to life-saving machines, to have my suffering turned into a joke, was unbearable. I tried to close the phone, to shove it away, but curiosity and perhaps a cruel hope kept me scrolling. More comments appeared, friends and distant relatives laughing, tagging one another. He really should have thought twice before working himself to death. And Family Day looks better without the drama king. A cold, sickly wave of nausea swept over me. I pressed my hand to my chest, not from physical pain, but from the sting of betrayal. This wasn't casual teasing. This was deliberate. My family had watched me struggle, had known the severity of my condition, and instead of offering care or concern, they had publicly mocked me. I swallowed hard, the bitter taste of saliva mixing with the raw ache in my chest. My heart wasn't just physically weak, it was being bruised emotionally in a way that no medication could fix. I tried to lie back against the pillows and block out the screen, but the words lingered, clinging to me like a second skin. By the second afternoon, my phone had become an instrument of dread. I barely had the energy to lift it, yet I couldn't resist checking again. Each time, more notifications popped up. Felicity had shared another photo from the same day, this time a close-up of Clara and her laughing, sunlit smile, tagged with captions like, "Laughing twice as hard without the stress," and "Missed him, but self-care comes first." I felt a surge of disbelief. Missed me? I was in the hospital, struggling to stay alive, and they called this self-care? My lips trembled. Anger and humiliation tangled with sadness, forming a knot too tight to loosen. The machines beeped steadily beside me, almost in rhythm with my pounding pulse, not entirely my own, but amplified by fear and hurt. What is wrong with them? I whispered aloud, my voice hoarse, broken. No answer came except the soft hum of the ventilator and the rhythmic beeping of the monitors. I was entirely alone, surrounded by medical staff who, while professional, could never fill the void of familial care. I let the phone drop to the side, sliding it gently onto the table. My hands shook, though not from weakness alone. Every memory of the last few days, the collapse, the pain, the waiting, the absence compressed into a single, crushing point. I felt exposed, humiliated, and utterly isolated. It was as if the entire world had decided to treat me as nothing more than an inconvenience. Then my phone began to buzz insistently, a rapid, unrelenting vibration that made my heart stutter. Weakly, I lifted it. 44 missed calls. 44. From Clara. From Robert. The sheer number of notifications alone made my chest tighten in alarm. I tapped the phone screen, opening the group text that had come through. The words stared back at me, clinical and cold in their urgency. We need you. Answer immediately. The message repeated itself in variations, some marked urgent, others with multiple exclamation points. They weren't checking on my health. They weren't asking if I was okay. They were demanding, commanding, treating me as if I were an object, a tool to be summoned at their convenience rather than a husband fighting for life. I pressed my lips together, trying not to cry. I tried to sit up, to compose some reply, to explain that I was weak, tethered to machines, that I had survived a heart attack, that their concerns should have arrived days ago in the form of a presence, a visit, a handheld, not demands typed into a glowing screen. But the strength simply wasn't there. My body trembled, my fingers barely able to reach the keypad. The messages felt like blows, each one a hammer against my exhaustion, my vulnerability, my very sense of self. I had expected neglect, but this was something else entirely. A mixture of entitlement and cruelty, a cold calculation that left me feeling smaller than I had ever been. I leaned back against the pillows, my body sagging. Machines beeped around me, the oxygen tube tickling my nostrils, the 4 drips steady and slow, a mechanical reminder that without this technology, I might not have survived even this long. Yet here I was, treated not as a human being, but as an accessory in my own family's narrative. A cold, bitter realization settled over me. My health was secondary to their convenience. My life, my fight, my survival was only relevant insofar as it fit their needs. They had mocked me online, celebrated my absence, and now, in the form of frantic, entitled texts and missed calls, they treated me like a tool to be summoned, a mechanism to serve their demands. Anger flared, mingling with humiliation. I wanted to scream, to throw the phone, to demand that someone, anyone, acknowledge the injustice of it. But my body refused. My strength had been sapped in the weeks leading up to the collapse, in the hours spent working, in the neglect that had gone unnoticed until this moment of acute betrayal. The irony of it all was crushing. I had devoted my life to ensuring stability, supporting the people I loved, managing responsibilities, sacrificing sleep and health for them. And yet, in my moment of vulnerability, in the hour when I needed care above all else, they had chosen mockery, exclusion, and entitlement over compassion. I lay back, staring at the ceiling, letting the silence of the hospital room settle around me. The only sounds were the mechanical hums and beeps, punctuated occasionally by footsteps in the hallway. My phone sat on the table, still glowing with the latest notifications, the number of missed calls climbing, the group text pulsating with urgency. 44 missed calls. We need you. Answer immediately. The words rang in my ears, a cold, sharp indictment. Chapter 4, A Ray of Hope. I stared at the glowing notifications on my phone, the repeated messages from Clara and Robert pulsing like a heartbeat I no longer recognized as my own. 44 missed calls. We need you. Answer immediately. My fingers hovered over the screen, trembling, but I couldn't bring myself to call back. Not yet. Not to them. Then, with a surge of desperation and memory, I remembered someone I could rely on, someone who had always been there in small, quiet ways, even when the rest of the world failed. My grandfather, Elias. It had been years since we'd spoken regularly. Life, distance, and a stubborn pride on both sides had created a chasm between us. But he was different from the rest of my family. He had a calm, steady way of seeing the world, a quiet wisdom that never sought attention. I dialed his number with shaky fingers, half expecting it to go to voicemail. Hello. His voice, deep and warm, sounded immediately familiar, a lifeline across the miles. Grandpa, it's me. I whispered, my throat tight with emotion. I need you. There was a pause and then, I'll be there. No hesitation, no questions, just certainty. Within the hour, the soft rumble of a car arriving outside reached my ears through the hospital window. My heart, still fragile, leapt. Elias walked in, tall and solid, a figure of reassurance. His eyes, sharp and kind, scanned my room before settling on me. "There he is," he said softly, almost to himself, then smiled at me. "You scare me half to death." I tried to smile back, but the effort was almost too much. I didn't want to bother you," I admitted, my voice cracking. It's been bad." Elias knelt beside the bed, placing a gentle hand on my shoulder. "You're not bothering anyone by being alive," he said firmly. "And right now, that's all that matters." The contrast between him and Clara, or the absence of her, was stark. Elias didn't question my weakness, didn't glance at his watch, didn't seem annoyed or impatient. He was present, fully, entirely, in a way I hadn't realized I'd been starving for. We settled into the small, sterile hospital room, the machines humming around us. I tried to explain the last few days, my voice faltering as the weight of isolation, betrayal, and humiliation poured out. Elias listened, nodding occasionally, his hand resting lightly on mine. He didn't interrupt, didn't offer platitudes. He simply listened, as if my words themselves mattered. "You've been through a lot," he said finally, his voice calm but firm. "And anyone who ignores that, well, that's their failing, not yours." I closed my eyes, the tension in my shoulders easing slightly. Memories surfaced unbidden. My grandfather teaching me to ride a bike as a child, steadying me when I wobbled and fell. Him sitting at the kitchen table late at night, helping with school projects, always patient, always present. He had never demanded perfection, never turned his back when things got difficult. And here he was, decades later, offering the same unwavering support. "Grandpa, I feel like I'm completely failing," I admitted, my voice small. "I collapsed. I'm weak. I don't know how to deal with all of this." Elias's hand squeezed mine gently. "You're not failing. You're human. And humans, they get hurt, they get tired, they make mistakes. What matters now is what you do next. And you've already done the hardest thing. You've survived." We moved on to the practical matters. The doctors had already started treatment, but navigating the hospital bureaucracy, insurance paperwork, and medical decisions was exhausting. I felt lost, unable to process forms or phone calls, my mind foggy from stress and medication. Elias took the reins. He spoke with nurses, asked questions, clarified instructions, and even double-checked the medications being administered. His calm authority made the staff respond differently, faster, more thoroughly. I watched him interact, a quiet confidence in his every movement, and realized how deeply I had underestimated the value of someone truly on my side. "Your vitals look stable," he said after talking with Dr. Halpern. "But we need to make sure the follow-up tests are done. We can't leave anything to chance." I nodded weakly. I wouldn't even know where to start. "And that's okay," he said, giving me a small, reassuring smile. "You don't have to. That's why I'm here. We'll get through this together." As the afternoon faded, we talked quietly about life, not just the hospital or the recent events. Elias reminded me of lessons I had nearly forgotten. How resilience wasn't measured by constant productivity, how people who truly mattered would support you without expectation, and how it was okay to accept help. I listened, absorbing each word, letting it sink into the frayed edges of my mind. I realized how isolated I had allowed myself to become, and how Clara and the rest of my family had exploited that isolation. Elias wasn't just a visitor. He was a lifeline, a reminder that I wasn't alone, that some bonds were real, unbreakable. "Remember when you were little," he said suddenly, leaning back in his chair, "and you couldn't figure out that math problem? You were frustrated, almost in tears, and I told you. Don't be afraid to ask for help. Even the strongest minds need guidance." I chuckled softly, the first genuine sounding days. "I remember, and I hated it at the time." "You hated it because you wanted to solve everything on your own," Elias said, smiling. "But strength isn't about doing everything alone. It's about knowing when to let someone in. And right now, I'm letting you in. You're not in this by yourself anymore." The words settled over me like a warm blanket. I closed my eyes, feeling a measure of relief I hadn't realized I was missing. In the quiet hospital room, Amidst the beeping monitors and the sterile scent, I felt a connection stronger than any screen notification or empty promise of family concern. This was genuine. This was real. For the first time in days, I felt the tight knot of anxiety and despair loosen, replaced by a fragile, yet undeniable, sense of hope. The presence of Elias reminded me that even in a world filled with neglect and betrayal, there could be allies, people whose care and loyalty were unquestionable. I met his gaze, weak but steady. "Thank you," I whispered. "No thanks needed," he said. "Just rest now. We've got this." And in that moment, I realized something profound. I wasn't alone. Not really. Elias was here. He understood, he cared, and he would help me navigate whatever came next. For the first time since the collapse, I allowed myself to relax, to let someone else take control, to trust. In a world that had suddenly felt cold and isolating, a ray of hope had arrived, tangible and warm, embodied in the man sitting beside my hospital bed. Chapter 5: Financial Betrayal. The hospital room was quiet, the steady hum of monitors forming a background rhythm to our work. Elias sat beside me, his laptop open, a notepad sprawled across the small table beside my bed. "We need to look at everything," he said firmly. "Every account, every transaction, every automatic payment. If your family has been taking advantage, we'll find out." I nodded weakly, my chest still tender, my body trembling from fatigue. The thought of confronting my finances, of seeing the reality of betrayal laid bare, terrified me. Yet in that moment, I trusted Elias completely. His presence gave me courage I hadn't realized I still had. He started with my bank accounts, systematically logging in and reviewing statements. Each click of the mouse, each line of figures on the screen, felt heavier than the last. My heart sank as I realized how much I had ignored over the years, how blissfully unaware I had been. "Look at this," Elias said quietly, his finger pointing at a long list of withdrawals and transfers. "Monthly payments to Felicity's boutique. It's failing, isn't it?" I swallowed hard, nodding. "Yes, I thought I was helping her get started. Give her a push." I didn't know she was bleeding money for years. "Years," Elias corrected. "Look here, every month, almost half your discretionary income went to her store." And it didn't stop there. He scrolled down, revealing another pattern. Robert's mortgage, car payments for multiple vehicles, home renovations, vacations, all secretly funded from your accounts. I leaned back against the pillows, my fingers gripping the blanket as nausea and disbelief surged together. I thought we were all managing together, that it was shared responsibilities. Elias shook his head, his expression tight. "They weren't sharing anything with you. They were taking, manipulating, and masking it as necessity or family support. Look at this. Wire transfers, automatic payments, even credit card charges. They didn't just take a little, they drained you slowly, systematically." I stared at the screen, the realization burning into me. Every dinner I had skipped to cover bills, every late night spent at work to build stability, had been quietly siphoned away. My own money, meant for my security, had been funneled into their luxuries and failures. The betrayal was staggering. "They knew exactly what they were doing," Elias continued. "And the worst part? They knew you wouldn't check, wouldn't question, because you trusted them. Every withdrawal, every transfer was calculated." I pressed my hands to my face, a low, bitter laugh escaping my lips. All these years, I thought I was supporting my family. I thought I was helping. And all the while, I was funding their lives while they ignored mine. While I nearly died. Elias didn't answer immediately. He simply placed a hand over mine, grounding me. That realization is painful. It's a lot to process. But now that you know, we can act. We can take control back. I exhaled shakily, trying to calm the rush of anger, betrayal, and disbelief that threatened to overwhelm me. Control, how? Where do we even start? He opened a new document, listing accounts, automatic payments, and recurring charges. Step 1. Freeze unnecessary accounts. Step 2. Cut off access where it's being abused. Step 3. Establish a clear line of financial authority. You're going to reclaim what's yours, and they won't have leverage anymore. My chest tightened at the thought. Confrontation had always terrified me, even with Clara. But this wasn't about confrontation in the usual sense. It was about survival, about protecting what was mine after years of silent theft. We started with Felicity's boutique. Every month, a substantial amount of my earnings had been deposited into her business account, marked as investment or support. Elias highlighted each entry, his finger tracing the drain over time. "She's been living off you for years," he said bluntly, "and pretending it's her own success story." I felt my stomach churn. Pretending while mocking me online, laughing at me while I lay in a hospital bed. My voice broke, the rage and hurt intertwining. "Yes," Elias said firmly, "and that's why we have to stop it now. You can't undo the past, but you can prevent further exploitation." Next came Robert's expenses. Multiple mortgage payments, car loans, and unexplained family expenditures that I had never authorized consciously. Every figure on the screen felt like a personal betrayal, a punch to my chest that my heart hadn't fully healed from. "Look at this one," Elias said, pointing to a recent wire transfer. $5,000. Furniture, home renovation, all charged without your consent. And yet, they would never have questioned you if the tables were turned. I gritted my teeth, my fists clenching the blanket. They treated me like a bank, not a husband, not a person, just a source of funds. Elias nodded solemnly. "Exactly. And now we stopped that." We went through every account meticulously. Credit cards, online banking, investments. The pattern was unmistakable. Years of subtle, concealed manipulation. My family had exploited my trust and my absence, quietly draining my financial security while pretending to care. I felt sick, a combination of physical weakness and emotional devastation pressing down on me. Each revelation compounded the sense of isolation I had felt since collapsing. The laughter, the social media posts, the absence at the hospital, all pieces of a puzzle that now fit together with cruel clarity. "Grandpa, I can't believe I didn't see it sooner," I whispered, my voice hollow. How could they do this to me?" "They relied on your trust," Elias said quietly. "They knew you wouldn't check. That's the nature of manipulative people. But we found it now, and that means we can fix it." I closed my eyes, letting the anger and betrayal pulse through me. The tears I hadn't allowed myself to shed in the hospital room finally slipped down my cheeks. It wasn't just money. It was the acknowledgement that people I had loved and trusted had deceived me, quietly eroding my life while I fought to survive. Elias's hand rested lightly on mine again. "It's painful," he said softly, "but pain can lead to clarity. You now know the truth, and truth is power." Finally, after hours of review, we reached the conclusion. I would need to take decisive action. Accounts would be frozen, automatic payments halted, and financial control restored to me alone. There would be backlash, confrontations, and perhaps further attempts at manipulation, but at least now, I would be prepared. I looked at Elias, my voice firm despite exhaustion. "We need to cut off all accounts. Everything they're exploiting, it ends today. I can't keep giving while being treated like this." Elias nodded, a small, approving smile on his face. "Good. That's the first step. Control what you can control, protect yourself, and don't let them dictate your life any longer. I'll help you through it." I exhaled, the weight on my chest easing slightly, not completely, but enough to make me feel alive again. For the first time in days, I felt a glimmer of empowerment, the beginnings of reclaiming my life. Together, we drafted a plan to secure my finances, to stop the exploitation, and to regain the autonomy that had been stolen from me over the years. It wouldn't be easy, and it wouldn't be without emotional fallout, but at least now, I wasn't facing alone. For the first time since the collapse, I felt a measure of control returning. Elias's calm, steady presence gave me the courage to act decisively, to confront betrayal with clarity, and to protect what was rightfully mine. Chapter 6: Immediate Fallout. The moment I froze the accounts, a storm erupted almost immediately. My phone, which had already been a source of tension, now vibrated incessantly, demanding attention. I picked it up with trembling fingers and was met first by a string of voicemails from Clara. How could you be so selfish? She shouted in the first message. After everything I've done for you, this is how you repay me? I swallowed hard, my chest tightening. Every word was laced with anger and entitlement, as if she believed I existed solely to serve her whims. I played the next voicemail. I can't believe this. You're destroying everything we've built. You're impossible. I pressed my hand against my forehead, exhaling shakily. Impossible, I muttered to myself bitterly. Impossible, after everything you've done to me. I wanted to respond, to explain, to scream at the injustice, but I couldn't. My body was still weak from the heart attack, and my mind was too consumed with disbelief to form words. I let the messages play, one after another, each one digging a little deeper into the wound of betrayal. Then my phone buzzed again, this time with frantic text from Felicity. My account, it's only $19. What did you do? I can't pay my employees. I can't pay rent. This is a disaster. I closed my eyes, the anger inside me flaring hot. Years of silent exploitation, of mockery while I was vulnerable, all boiled over in that single moment. Her panic was almost poetic justice, though it didn't erase the bitterness of betrayal. Finally, I whispered to the empty room, "You're seeing consequences." Elias, sitting beside me and watching the unfolding chaos, shook his head slightly. Stay calm. This is exactly why we froze the accounts. Let them react. Don't engage emotionally. Document everything. I nodded, still reeling, as more messages appeared. Robert's voice joined the digital cacophony, this time through emails and texts. You're destroying the family, he typed in capital letters. Do you even realize what you've done? All the sacrifices we've made. And this is how you repay us? You've gone too far. I leaned back, pressing my hand to my chest. Every word felt like a hammer, but also an affirmation of what I had uncovered. They had depended entirely on my resources, and now that the flow had stopped, they were furious. Elias's calm hand on my shoulder was grounding. We knew this would happen, he said quietly. This is the first wave. They'll try to guilt, intimidate, and manipulate. Don't let it get to you. The next day brought another revelation. I received a call from my bank's fraud department. Felicity had attempted to make multiple unauthorized withdrawals after discovering her balance had dropped. Robert had called demanding immediate reinstatement of all accounts, threatening legal action. They've realized you mean business, Elias said as he helped me go through the call records. Good. Let them see there are boundaries now. Social media, of course, became the next battlefield. Posts and stories portrayed me as the villain. The uncaring husband, the selfish son, the unreasonable provider who had suddenly turned his back on family obligations. Meanwhile, Clara and Felicity painted themselves as victims, their words carefully curated to elicit sympathy from friends and acquaintances. But the truth remained buried in the data Elias and I had compiled. Screenshots, bank statements, and transaction histories revealed a different story, a story of exploitation, financial manipulation, and years of betrayal. It wasn't just about money anymore. The fallout quickly moved into legal territory. I discovered a court filing. Clara and Robert had attempted to declare me legally incompetent, citing irrational behavior in cutting off the family accounts. They requested an emergency guardianship, claiming I was incapable of managing my finances or making rational decisions. My stomach twisted as I read the documents. The audacity was staggering. My own family, after years of quietly siphoning my funds and mocking me online, now claimed I was unfit to manage my own life. Elias leaned over my shoulder, reviewing the papers with a discerning eye. It's a common tactic, he said. They're trying to regain control, to pressure you into reversing the account freezes. But we have evidence, emails, screenshots, bank records. This is more than enough to defend against their claims. I swallowed hard, a mix of anger and disbelief coursing through me. They're trying to rewrite reality, I muttered, to make me the bad guy after everything they've done. Yes, Elias confirmed. And that's why we document everything. Every message, every transaction. We'll build a clear timeline showing the exploitation, the mockery, and their attempts at manipulation. We're not just fighting for finances, we're fighting for the truth. The weight of betrayal pressed down on me. But for the first time, I felt a flicker of clarity and strategy amidst the chaos. Elias's calm presence, his methodical approach to untangling the web of lies and deceit, gave me something I hadn't had in weeks. Control. We'll respond carefully, he said, pulling out a legal pad and jotting notes. Every voicemail, every panicked message, every post online, we log it. Every interaction counts. This is how we prove intent, manipulation, and abuse. I nodded, my hands trembling slightly as I glanced at my phone. Clara's angry voicemails still played in my mind, Felicity's panicked texts flashing across the screen, and Robert's accusatory messages scowling from the email inbox. But Elias's words steadied me. We had a plan, evidence, a strategy. Their tantrums won't undo the work we've done, Elias continued. But we need to be meticulous. One misstep, and they could try to twist the narrative. Every email we save, every screenshot we capture, it all counts. And with this, we'll have a strong defense against any legal maneuvering. I exhaled slowly, letting the tension ebb slightly. The storm of anger, humiliation, and betrayal was still present, but it was no longer overwhelming. There was structure to our response, a clear path forward. I wasn't defenseless, not anymore. As the day wore on, I began to respond cautiously to the situation, not emotionally, but strategically. Every phone call was documented, every text archived. I refrained from replying impulsively, following Elias's guidance, letting the family's reactions unfold while we prepared the evidence to counteract them. It was a delicate balance. The personal betrayal was raw, the humiliation from their social media posts still stinging, yet I had to focus on the practical measures. The more I listened to Elias, the more I realized how critical his support had become. He wasn't just a witness or a helper, he was a strategist, a protector, someone who understood not only the emotional stakes, but the legal and practical ones as well. Grandpa, I said quietly as we reviewed another set of emails, I don't think I could handle this alone. Not the betrayal, not the manipulation, not the threats. You won't have to, Elias replied, his hand brushing mine. I'll be with you through every step. We'll document, respond, and protect what's yours. You're not alone in this, not for a single moment. His calm voice, so full of certainty, grounded me. Amid the chaos of angry voicemails, panicked texts, and legal threats, a small sense of stability emerged. For the first time since the collapse, I felt that I wasn't merely a passive victim of circumstance. I could act, I could respond, and I could reclaim control over my life. The immediate fallout was brutal, messy, and emotionally draining. Clara screamed at me through voicemails. Felicity panicked over her vanishing funds. Robert accused me of destroying the family. And online, they played victims while the house of cards they had built began to wobble. They had lost their material comforts, but the facade of sympathy and righteousness was all they clung to. And yet, amid the chaos, there was a plan, there was evidence, and there was Elias. Together, we were documenting, organizing, and preparing to fight back, legally, strategically, and undeniably. It would be a long, messy process, but for the first time since the collapse, I felt capable of facing it. I wasn't alone. I had an ally, and with Elias guiding me, I could finally begin to push back. Chapter 7, Social Media Smear. The notifications started slowly at first. A single alert, a muted vibration on my phone, which I had grown accustomed to ignoring. But within hours, the pace became overwhelming. Tweets, posts, Instagram stories, TikTok videos, even private messages forwarded to mutual friends. Clara and Felicity had launched a coordinated social media campaign, painting me as unstable, erratic, and unfit to manage my own life. The narrative they spun was meticulous. Clara appeared in short, carefully crafted videos. Soft lighting, sympathetic tone, hands clasped as she spoke to the camera. It's heartbreaking, she said. He's been making irrational decisions, ignoring medical advice, and putting everyone at risk. I'm just trying to protect him and the family. Felicity followed with dramatic Instagram stories, showing herself in exaggerated despair, clutching her face, pretending to sob, captioning each image with hashtags like abandoned and worried and family first. Her followers chimed in, echoing her portrayal, sending messages of support and concern for her and Clara, while insinuating that I was unstable, selfish, and manipulative. I stared at my phone, the room silent except for the beeping monitors and the occasional footstep of hospital staff outside. My hand shook, not from weakness, but from the sheer absurdity and malice of what they were doing. "Grandpa, they're doing this," I whispered, my voice low and tense. "They're turning everyone against me, even friends, colleagues, people who don't know the truth." Elias leaned over, reading the post carefully. His expression remained calm, but resolute. "This is predictable," he said. "They're trying to rewrite reality, to control the narrative. But they've underestimated one thing. Evidence doesn't lie." As the hours passed, the online world reacted exactly as they hoped. Comments flowed in, supportive of Clara and Felicity, condemning me in absence. Messages arrived in my personal accounts from people I barely knew, expressing concern over my alleged behavior. "I can't believe he would do this to his own family. Hope he gets help soon. He seems really unstable. You should be careful." I felt a cold, hollow sensation in my chest. Years of trust and loyalty reduced to pixels and captions. My life reduced to a caricature curated by people I had called family. But Elias's calm presence grounded me. "We fight perception with proof," he said firmly. "We've documented their behavior for months, social media posts, bank statements, voicemails, emails. The truth is on our side. Their attempts to smear you will crumble if we show it systematically." I nodded, swallowing hard. It hurts seeing them lie so blatantly. So many people believe them without question. "People believe what's convenient to believe," Elias said. "But the ones who care about facts, the ones who matter, will see the truth. We just need to be patient, methodical, and ready with evidence." The turning point came when we unearthed the screenshots of Felicity's drama-free family day. The cheerful photos, taken weeks earlier, were now starkly contradictory to her ongoing portrayal of victimhood online. She had laughed, smiled, and posed for the camera while I lay in a hospital bed, weak and vulnerable, tethered to machines. I stared at the images, my stomach tightening. This proves everything," I said softly. She mocked me while I was fighting for my life. Elias nodded. "Exactly. This is the hypocrisy we need to highlight. We don't attack people personally. We present facts, contradictions, timelines. It's irrefutable." We compiled the screenshots, timestamps, and corresponding social media posts into a cohesive timeline. Each image and caption was cross-referenced with bank records, voicemails, and hospital admissions. It was meticulous work, but necessary. The truth was sharp, and now it could be wielded effectively. The next day, the narrative began to shift. Evidence went out strategically, first to close friends and colleagues, then to social media followers through verified accounts. Screenshots, posts, and timelines exposed the stark contrast. Felicity's laughter on drama-free family day versus her tearful, performative posts portraying me as unstable. Clara's carefully edited videos versus the reality of her absence at my bedside. Responses were immediate. Followers who had unquestioningly believed Clara and Felicity began to doubt. "Wait, didn't she post that picture while he was in hospital?" one wrote. "These timelines don't add up. Something feels off." Another commented, "I've been supporting her, but now it looks like she was lying. This is messed up." Even sponsors and brand partners began to notice. Felicity, who had leveraged her social media presence for influencer deals, started receiving messages of concern. Contracts were paused, partnerships reconsidered, and eventually, several brands withdrew entirely after confirming the timeline and evidence. Clara, meanwhile, faced professional consequences. Her employer, having reviewed the evidence of her misleading public statements and manipulations, suspended her pending an internal review. The narrative she had tried to craft collapsed under scrutiny, replaced with the inconvenient truth of her absence during my hospitalization and her family's exploitation of my finances. I sat back in a hospital bed, exhausted, watching the tide of public opinion shift. It was not an instantaneous victory. Social media moves slowly, but the facts were clear. Evidence, careful documentation, and patience began to counter the false narrative. Elias placed a hand on my shoulder. See, truth has power. Lies can dominate momentarily, but facts endure. People who matter will recognize them. I nodded slowly, feeling a mix of relief and lingering anger. The betrayal, mockery, and attempts at manipulation had left deep scars, but the unfolding reversal offered a measure of justice. Clara and Felicity had gambled on perception, but in the end, reality was stronger. Throughout the day, I followed the unfolding developments. The comments shifted from anger directed at me to skepticism about Clara and Felicity's claims. Screenshots of their hypocrisy circulated, fact-checked, and shared widely. The public narrative began to realign with reality. I had been abandoned, mocked, and financially exploited, and my family's attempts to portray themselves as victims were unraveling. Sponsors continued to drop Felicity, citing her misleading posts and lack of credibility. Clara faced suspension at work and growing professional scrutiny. For the first time in weeks, I allowed myself a tentative sense of vindication. It was not triumph over pain. Nothing could undo the emotional trauma, but it was validation. The truth, once meticulously documented and presented, began to restore balance. Elias, ever steady, reminded me, we still have work to do, legally and emotionally. But this is a start. It shows that even when manipulated, even when betrayed, truth can fight back. I exhaled, a slow, shaky breath, letting the tension ease slightly. The monitors beeped steadily beside me, a comforting rhythm amid the chaos of collapsing narratives. For the first time since my collapse, I felt a fragile sense of control returning, a reassurance that careful, evidence-based action could counter the most vicious manipulations. Public opinion, once swayed by Clara and Felicity's deceit, began to shift. The facade they had built crumbled under scrutiny, and the consequences, both social and professional, started to manifest. Sponsors dropped Felicity. Clara faced suspension. And for the first time in weeks, I allowed myself to feel that the tide was turning. Chapter 8, Last Manipulations. The morning sun slanted through the hospital blinds, casting thin lines of light across the room. The air smelled faintly of antiseptic, a constant reminder that my recovery was still fragile. Yet my mind was far from the monitors and machines that hummed steadily beside me. I was scrolling through emails when a new attachment appeared in my inbox, a scanned copy of a handwritten will sent by an anonymous source. I opened it, curiosity mingled with wariness. Robert's handwriting sprawled across the page, neat and deliberate. My eyes darted across the lines. To my son-in-law, he shall inherit nothing unless he reconciles with the family and seeks forgiveness for his actions. I felt my stomach tighten. A surge of disbelief followed quickly by a bitter laugh that echoed weakly in the sterile room. Nothing, unless I reconcile, I muttered aloud. After everything, after the years of lies and theft. Elias, sitting in the chair beside me, glanced at the screen. His brow furrowed slightly, though his expression remained calm. I see it, he said. And what do you make of it? I shook my head, a small, incredulous smile tugging at my lips. It's a trap. That's all it is. They're dangling inheritance like a carrot, but there's nothing behind it. Just debt, manipulation, and emotional blackmail. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. Exactly. It's a test of loyalty to them, not a legitimate inheritance. They want to control you, even after everything, using money as leverage. I ran my hands through my hair, the tension and absurdity of the situation coiling inside me. All these years, and now they're trying one last time to pull me back in, to make me feel guilty. But it's empty. There's no benefit, no gain, just strings attached to their delusions of power. Elias nodded, a faint, approving smile on his face. And that's why we ignore it. You've already reclaimed your life. This is just one last attempt to manipulate you. I leaned back against the pillows, exhaling slowly. A feeling of clarity began to settle over me, one that I hadn't felt in weeks. The years of betrayal, humiliation, and exploitation had led to this moment of understanding. I didn't need their approval, their forgiveness, or their money. All of it had been a lie, carefully constructed to maintain control over me. I laughed again, a sharp, clear sound that startled even me. All this drama, all the lies, the blackmail, and they think this will work? That I'll crawl back. Elias chuckled softly, shaking his head. They underestimated you. Not for the first time, and certainly not the last. You've seen through the facade. The absurdity of it all was almost comedic. Robert's will, Clara's manipulation, Felicity's performances online. It was a theater of control that I'd been cast in unwillingly. And yet, here I was, the playwright now removed, watching the puppets struggle with the strings they had once held so tightly. I felt a sense of liberation I hadn't experienced in years. The need to prove myself, to appease their demands, to maintain their illusion of family loyalty, it all dissolved. What remained was clarity, and with clarity came a strange, exhilarating freedom. Elias watched me carefully, his eyes reflecting understanding. So, what do you want to do? I looked at him, a firm resolve in my gaze. I want nothing from them. No inheritance, no approval, no reconciliation. Their attempt to manipulate me ends here. Permanently. He nodded. Then let's make it official. A clean break. Legal boundaries, no contact measures, and your peace preserved. I felt a surge of relief at the thought. The very idea of cutting ties, once frightening and guilt-ridden, now felt empowering. It was the ultimate act of self-preservation. I was no longer a victim of circumstance or manipulation. I had the authority to define my own life, free from their control. Elias guided me through the process. We drafted the necessary documents for a permanent no-contact order, ensuring that Clara, Felicity, and Robert would be legally barred from harassing, threatening, or attempting to manipulate me. Every step felt like reclaiming a piece of myself that had been stolen over the years. This is it, Elias said, as we reviewed the final paperwork. Once this is filed, you'll have legal protection, and they won't be able to reach you. Not calls, not texts, not emails. I nodded, a weight lifting from my shoulders. I can finally breathe, finally live without them. The irony of it all was not lost on me. I had spent decades striving to provide, to nurture, to maintain bonds with a family that had taken advantage of every ounce of my trust. And now, in a few simple strokes of a pen, I reclaimed not just my finances, but my autonomy, my dignity, and my life. I thought back to the hospital bed where I had first woken up, weak and betrayed, surrounded by machines that were keeping me alive. The contrast between that moment and this one was stark. Then I had felt helpless, abandoned, and mocked. Now I felt strong, not physically perhaps, but emotionally and mentally. I had allies, evidence, and a plan. I had Elias, yes, but more importantly, I had myself. The no-contact order wasn't just a legal measure. It was a symbolic act of closure. I wasn't just blocking emails or calls. I was severing the emotional manipulation that had haunted me for years. I was declaring, finally and irrevocably, that I would no longer be a pawn in their games. I allowed myself to smile, a small but genuine curve of the lips. All these years, I whispered to the quiet hospital room, and the only thing I lost was them. Not money, not health, not dignity, just the wrong people. Elias nodded, sharing the quiet triumph. And that's worth more than any inheritance, more than anything they could ever give you. The absurdity, the audacity, the sheer manipulation of Robert's handwritten will now felt almost comical. I laughed again, this time with genuine relief. They think they can control me with threats and promises of inheritance, I said, shaking my head. But there's nothing left to control. No strings, no leverage. Just freedom. I signed the documents, each stroke of the pen a small victory, a mark of independence. When I finished, I leaned back against the pillows and exhaled slowly. The legal measures, combined with the emotional clarity, created a sense of permanence. There was no going back, no halfway compromises, no lingering doubts. Elias smiled, a mixture of pride and reassurance. This is the start of the next chapter. You've survived betrayal, exploitation, and manipulation. Now, you live on your own terms. I looked out the window, sunlight streaming through the blinds, feeling the warmth on my face. For the first time in weeks, I felt unshackled, untethered, and truly free. The machinations of Clara, Felicity, and Robert could no longer touch me. Not emotionally, not financially, not legally. With a no-contact order officially filed, I allowed myself a final thought, almost a whisper. I'm done with them. Done with the lies. Done with the drama. Done with being their pawn. And for the first time since my collapse, I laughed, not bitterly, not with anger, but with genuine, liberating clarity. Chapter 9, Recovery and Renewal. The day I was discharged from the hospital dawned crisp and clear. Sunlight streamed through the glass doors as Elias helped me into the car, steadying me with careful hands. My body was still weak, each step deliberate and measured, but my mind felt lighter than it had in weeks. For the first time since the collapse, I felt a sense of direction, not chaos, not manipulation, not betrayal, but clarity. Are you sure you're ready for this? Elias asked gently as we drove through winding roads, the city fading behind us. It's a long ride to the cabin, and your body still needs rest. I nodded, swallowing hard. I'm ready. I need to be away from all of it. The noise, the people, everything that reminds me of what happened. He gave a small, approving smile. Good. Isolation can be healing. Reflection can be powerful. In this cabin, no distractions, just nature, quiet, and time to recover. You'll regain strength, physically and emotionally. The ride took us out of the city, past rolling hills and dense forests, where the air was fresher, cleaner, untouched by the chaos of my previous life. The closer we got to the cabin, the more my anxiety seemed to ebb, replaced by a fragile sense of anticipation. Elias had chosen the location carefully. Secluded yet accessible, rustic yet comfortable, a space to breathe without intrusion. We arrived at the cabin in the early afternoon. Wooden beams framed the structure, and smoke curled lazily from the chimney. A small porch overlooked a valley, mountains rising like sentinels in the distance. The scent of pine and damp earth filled the air. I exhaled slowly, the first deep, untroubled breath in weeks. Welcome to your new home for recovery, Elias said, opening the car door for me. No obligations, no messages, no financial predators, just you space and time. I stepped out, feeling the weight of the hospital, the collapse, and the betrayal begin to lift slightly. For the first time in weeks, I allowed myself to smile, not a wary, tentative smile, but one that reached my eyes. The days at the cabin were slow, deliberate, and structured by Elias to aid both physical and emotional recovery. Morning routines involved stretching exercises, light walks along forest trails, and deep breathing sessions overlooking the mountains. The crisp air invigorated my lungs, and each step, though small at first, reminded me of my body's resilience. Take it slow, Elias advised on the first morning, holding a yoga mat as I hesitated. Your heart still needs time to adjust. Small victories now will compound over weeks. I nodded, placing my hands on the mat, grounding myself. The stretches were simple, almost meditative, and by the end of the session, I felt a lightness I hadn't realized I'd missed, the sensation of movement without pain, without fear, without intrusion. Meals were prepared simply but nutritiously. Fresh vegetables, fruits, and protein carefully portioned to aid healing. Elias insisted we cook together when possible, teaching me the art of preparing meals that nourished both body and soul. Food is medicine, he said one afternoon, chopping carrots with deliberate precision. It's part of your recovery. Nourish yourself, and your body will thank you. I watched the knife glide through vegetables, sharp and precise, and for the first time in weeks, I felt engaged with life again. We laughed quietly over small mistakes, a dropped carrot, a burnt edge on a slice of bread, tiny moments of levity that reminded me of normalcy, of simple pleasures. Remote work began cautiously. Elias helped me set up a small home office in a sunlit corner of the cabin. The laptop hummed quietly, emails queued but muted, responsibilities gradually reintroduced on my terms. I worked in short bursts, taking breaks to walk outside, stretch, or simply gaze at the mountains. It's important you pace yourself, Elias reminded me. You're regaining independence, not rushing to prove anything to anyone. I nodded, fingers flying over the keyboard, enjoying the focus without pressure, the sense of accomplishment without the looming threat of exploitation. For the first time, work was something I controlled, something that belonged solely to me. Evenings were quiet, a deliberate contrast to the chaos I had endured. We would sit on the porch, mugs of tea in hand, watching the sun set behind the mountains. The sky turned shades of amber and violet, and the world seemed to exhale with me. "Do you remember when you were a child?" Elias asked one evening. "How you used to stare at the stars for hours? Trying to find patterns, trying to understand where you fit." I chuckled softly. I remember. I thought the sky was trying to tell me something. Elias smiled. "Maybe it was. And maybe now, it's reminding you that the world is bigger than any betrayal, bigger than any manipulation. Your place in it is yours to define." The words settled over me, comforting and profound. I realized that recovery wasn't just physical. It was mental, emotional, spiritual. Every day spent walking the trails, cooking meals, working remotely, or watching the sky was a step away from trauma and toward wholeness. Small victories became markers of progress. I could walk longer distances without fatigue. I could complete tasks without anxiety spiraling. I could smile at the sky without guilt, laugh at small mishaps, and focus on work without the shadow of financial abuse or family manipulation looming overhead. "Look at that," Elias said one morning, pointing to a robin perched on the railing. "Even the smallest things can bring joy if you notice them." I nodded, feeling a deep resonance. Each small bird, each ripple on the nearby creek, each breath of clean mountain air was a reminder of life beyond betrayal, beyond manipulation, beyond pain. I began journaling, documenting thoughts, fears, and reflections. Each entry was a small release, a way to process what had happened and envision what was next. Elias encouraged it, guiding me to focus not on anger or revenge, but on clarity, strength, and future possibilities. "You've survived a storm," he said one afternoon as I wrote. "Now it's time to rebuild. Not what they wanted you to be, but what you choose for yourself." I closed the notebook, looking out at the forest stretching endlessly before me. Freedom wasn't just legal or financial. It was emotional, mental, spiritual. And in these quiet, deliberate moments, I felt it growing, steady, and unstoppable. Weeks passed, and with each day, the cabin transformed from a place of recovery into a sanctuary. I began to feel comfortable in my own company, independent and empowered. Remote work flowed smoothly, my body gained strength, and my mind grew sharper. Financial autonomy, regained through decisive action earlier, now allowed me to plan for the future without fear or interference. I reflected on the life I had left behind, the betrayals, the exploitation, the manipulations, and for the first time, I could see them without anger consuming me. Clarity replaced resentment, strategy replaced impulsivity, and freedom replaced obligation. One evening, watching the sun dip behind the mountains, I whispered quietly to myself, "I'm alive. I'm free. And I can finally be me." Elias, seated beside me, gave a small nod, understanding without words. Peace was not instantaneous, and recovery was ongoing, but the path was clear. The trauma had not been erased, but the steps forward were tangible, deliberate, and within my control. In that quiet cabin, far from the chaos of betrayal and manipulation, I began to understand the true value of healing. The small victories, the slow steps forward, the freedom to live without fear, and the ability to define my life on my own terms. Chapter 10: Reflection and Freedom. Months had passed since I first stepped into the cabin, weak, betrayed, and tethered to machines that had once dictated the rhythm of my life. Now, as the morning sun filtered through the tall pines surrounding the cabin, I felt a quiet strength coursing through me, physical, emotional, and mental. The monotony of hospital walls had been replaced by expansive horizons, fresh mountain air, and a world that felt, for the first time in decades, mine to claim. I sat on the porch, a steaming mug of tea warming my hands, watching mist curl across the valley below. The mountains were still, ancient, and imposing, yet strangely comforting. I breathed deeply, tasting the crisp air, and let my mind wander back over the journey, the collapse, the betrayals, the manipulations, and the painstaking steps toward freedom. Elias, ever my anchor, joined me with a small smile and a thermos of coffee. He sat beside me, the aroma mingling with the tea. "Morning," he said softly. "Looks like another perfect day." I smiled faintly, watching a hawk circle above the distant peaks. "It is," I murmured, "peaceful and quiet, the kind of quiet that heals." Elias nodded knowingly. "You've come a long way, from a hospital bed to this serenity. How are you feeling today?" I set down my mug, letting the warmth seep into my hands. Stronger, clearer, free, in a way I never imagined I could be. I still carry the scars, the anger, the betrayal, but it doesn't control me anymore. He leaned back in his chair, eyes thoughtful. Freedom doesn't erase pain. It simply allows you to live despite it. You've learned that, haven't you? I nodded, letting out a slow exhale. I've learned that the things I thought I lost weren't losses at all. What I lost were toxic people pretending to be family. What I gained is clarity, peace, and a life I can truly call mine. The cabin had become more than a place of recovery. It had become a sanctuary of reflection. Every morning, I walked the forest trails, observing birds, streams, and the subtle rhythms of nature. The physical act of walking, the deliberate pacing, and the meditative quiet allowed thoughts to surface naturally. I contemplated the cascade of events that had brought me here. The collapse at work, the betrayal of Clara and her family, the financial exploitation, and the long nights of solitude and worry. Yet with each reflection came a new understanding. I had been through manipulation and loss, yes, but also through growth and awakening. The world that had once felt dangerous and hostile now seemed manageable, even inviting. Each decision I had made to reclaim control, cutting off accounts, documenting abuses, building evidence, had led me here to a place of safety, autonomy, and resilience. One afternoon, while journaling on the porch, Elias joined me quietly, a notebook in his hand. "Writing helps," he said. "Capture everything, feelings, victories, lessons. One day you'll look back and realize how far you've come." I glanced up, smiling. I do feel that already. The past months, they've taught me more than years of ordinary life ever could. I've learned who I am without their influence, without their manipulation, without their control. I'm someone capable of peace, resilience, and even joy. Elias nodded approvingly. And that's wisdom. Hard-earned, but invaluable. Remote work had become a source of empowerment rather than obligation. I was no longer tethered to the whims of family, no longer forced into decisions that served others at my expense. Each project completed brought a quiet satisfaction, a reminder that my efforts now benefited me, and that autonomy had its own rewards. One morning, while video conferencing with a client, I laughed freely at a technical glitch that used to send my stress levels skyrocketing. "Sorry about that," I said, smiling. "Looks like technology is testing my patience today, not my health." The client chuckled. "No worries. You're handling this beautifully." I realized as the screen dimmed and the call ended that I was managing stress with a composure that would have been impossible months ago. I had not just survived betrayal and manipulation. I had integrated the lessons, grown stronger, and cultivated resilience. Evenings were spent in quiet reflection, sometimes with Elias, sometimes alone. I would watch the sun dip below the peaks, casting golden hues across the valley. Occasionally, I would recall the chaos of Clara and Felicity's social media smear campaign, the desperate messages from Robert, the attempts at financial blackmail, and I would allow myself a small, almost private laugh. Funny, isn't it? I said aloud one evening, talking more to the mountains than anyone else. All that effort to control me, and it changed nothing. I'm still here. I'm stronger, and they've lost me. Elias, sitting beside me on the wooden porch, smiled. And that's all they ever lost, the ability to influence your life. That's power you've reclaimed. That's freedom. I looked over the railing, watching the river wind through the valley below. The current was steady, unyielding, yet serene. I understand now, I murmured. Freedom isn't about what others can give you or take from you. It's about what you can claim for yourself, your peace, your choices, your life. The small victories became daily affirmations. I could rise with the sun without dread, prepare meals without guilt, engage in work without fear, and navigate each day without manipulation lurking in the background. Each bird call, each ripple in the creek, each breeze through the pine trees was a reminder of the life I had reclaimed. I began meditating regularly, focusing on breath, presence, and gratitude. The clarity of thought that followed was unlike anything I had experienced before. I could examine emotions without being consumed, reflect on events without reliving trauma, and plan for the future without fear or hesitation. Your resilience is remarkable, Elias said one morning, handing me a steaming cup of herbal tea. Not everyone can survive what you did and emerge so balanced. You've turned adversity into wisdom. I accepted the cup, warmth seeping into my hands. It took months to see it this way, I admitted. But now I feel grounded. I feel safe. I feel like myself. Some days, I still thought of Clara, Felicity, and Robert, not with longing or guilt, but as lessons etched into memory. They were reminders of how easily trust could be exploited, how manipulations could fester unnoticed, and how critical it was to set boundaries. Yet these thoughts no longer carried pain. They carried knowledge, strength, and clarity. I've lost them, I whispered one afternoon, gazing at the peaks. But I haven't lost me. That's the only thing that matters. Elias nodded silently. No words were needed. The months of recovery, reflection, and rebuilding had transformed not just my body, but my spirit. I was free, truly and entirely, from all that had sought to constrain me. As the sun set, painting the sky with hues of gold and violet, I allowed myself to sit in silence. The machines that once tethered me were gone. The voices that once manipulated me were distant echoes. The financial and emotional chains had been broken, and in their absence, peace settled in. I smiled softly, eyes tracing the horizon. I didn't lose everything, I whispered. I lost the wrong people, and in losing them, I found myself. The mountains stood as eternal witnesses to my journey, the valley below stretching endlessly, full of possibilities. I breathed deeply, filling my lungs with crisp, clean air, feeling the sunlight on my face. The road had been arduous, the lessons harsh, but the destination was unmistakably mine. Contentment, safety, and wisdom earned through adversity. And for the first time in a lifetime, I felt fully, profoundly free.